Hey everyone, Britt Albert here. If this is your first time here, I'm a spiritual transformational life coach. It's my goal for this channel to help you overcome the obstacles that are standing in the way of you living your best and most authentic life. In today's video, I want to talk about taking accountability for our own toxic traits and how to deal with the guilt and shame as we're healing them. Now, when we reach that certain stage of self-awareness, or we're able to sit down with ourselves and we're able to say, okay, I recognize that in this situation, I'm actually the toxic person. I'm the one that's hurting these people. I've done these things. And we take ownership of our story and we take responsibility and accountability for those that we've hurt. We can carry that guilt for years. And guilt in and of itself isn't necessarily the thing that holds us back, but it's shame. Now, why do we want to forgive ourselves and let go of that guilt and shame? Because ultimately what that does is it continues to drive the narrative of the victim mentality. It continues to drive the story that you are a victim. Because in this instance, even though you may be the villain in the story, recognizing your own toxic behavior and how you have hurt other people, you're still a victim of yourself. I did this to myself. I did this to them. I caused these things. Now, that's not to belittle the truth of the situation. But when we stay in that mindset and we don't forgive ourselves and we don't allow ourselves to move on, we're continuing to perpetuate that behavior over and over again in other ways that we may not be aware of. We're still playing out the same story. We're not really fixing ourselves. It's kind of like when you learn something new. Say, for example, you read a book, or maybe even you watch one of my videos, and you gain more information and more knowledge than you had before. You have that aha moment, but you don't put any of it into action. What have you actually learned? Can you truly say that you've learned anything at all if you're not putting it into action? That's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to forgive ourselves, to be able to accept the things that we've done, and be able to allow ourselves to move on. Now, this is very, very difficult when you're in the midst of it. It is so much easier to just tell you, hey, let go. But for me to tell somebody who's carrying shame and guilt to just let it go and forgive themselves is almost the same thing as me telling somebody who's struggling with anxiety or depression to just get over it. It's like, okay, that's nice in theory, but that's just complete crap and not at all helpful to anybody in this situation. So what I want to do today is I want to talk you through and walk you through what this is like to let go of the shame. What's the difference between guilt and shame, and really understand how to receive self-forgiveness when you don't feel like you deserve to be forgiven. Even if everybody else forgives you, you don't feel like you deserve forgiveness for what you've done, and you're holding yourself hostage in that victim mentality. How do we move into healing? How do we move past this? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get into that though, if this is not your first time here, if you have watched more than one of my videos, go ahead and subscribe if you've not already subscribed, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss out on a future video. Also, near the end of this video, I'm not going to have you do it now unless you just want to because you're awesome, but if you gain something from this video, or you think of somebody who this video would speak to, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Again, you don't have to do it now unless you're just awesome. But if this video speaks to you or gives something to your life, adds value to you, please give it a thumbs up. Have you ever heard that there are 3 sides to every story? There's your side, their side, and the truth. And the truth is a combination of both of the sides and usually more information than is available for either side to see. What's another way that you can think of that? Broadening your perspective or changing your perspective. When we change our perspective, we're able to see things from a different point of view than we're currently at within ourselves. For the topic of this video, I am the one with the toxic behavior, and I gaslighted this person. Now, I can see what I did to them, and I can also understand why I did it. I did it because I felt threatened in that moment, and I felt afraid. Say, I did something that I was ashamed of, and maybe that thing wasn't such a big deal, but to me it was. and I didn't want it to be found out. And this person was close to finding out whatever my shame might have been. So I gaslighted them and made them feel crazy, so they would drop the pursuit of me speaking my truth that I was not ready to speak. There's a fear inside of me. It doesn't feel safe for whatever reason to speak that truth. Whether this was something that I did that I was trying to cover up or something that happened to me, whatever it is, I have an identity associated with this truth and I don't want people to know about it. So I'm the one with the toxic behavior and I'm gaslighting this person. Well, that's one side of the perspective. The other side of the perspective is maybe this person, they see the truth and they either care for me and they want to pull it out of me, or if it's a relationship situation, say for example, one person, we're going to say me, will say that I did something to my partner and they're trying to find the truth. They need to know for their own safety as well. They need to know, are they continuing to stay invested in this relationship or do they need to go? Do they need to start looking for another place to live or whatever the situation entails that has something to do with their safety, their time, their energy. And so I don't want to lose them. So I'm going to make them feel crazy so that they'll stop asking, because I don't want either consequence, either the shame to come out and for me to expose my shame to them, and or the consequences that will come of me exposing my shame to them. So they're justified in their search of the truth, and I feel justified in my fear. Then what's the broader picture? If we zoom out from both of those perspectives, and it's like we look down on what's happening in the situation with these two people, what could be another narrative to that story? What is more information that we could receive to understand the truth of the whole story? The truth of the whole story is you have two people who are both scared and they're both seeking to feel safe. And neither one of them are feeling safe with the other at the moment. When we have a broader perspective, when we're able to change our perspective, we can have a lot more compassion for one another and understand that there are ways that we can approach things that don't blame people. Because you might be thinking in your mind, okay, well, in this fake example, maybe I cheated and they're trying to find out. Well, why would that be on some of your minds? Probably because you have experience with that. But what if my shame is that somebody hurt me and I didn't want to tell my partner because I was ashamed that I put myself in a situation to get hurt? How does that change the narrative? Am I still a villain because I was hurt by somebody and I'm too ashamed and too scared to let that be known? So I'm still having the toxic behavior of gaslighting this person because I'm afraid to let the truth be known. It feels different, doesn't it? Now, when we're the person, the toxic person, and we become aware, it doesn't really matter. When we feel the guilt for the first time and we truly feel the pain that we've inflicted on somebody else, we have a tendency to hold it close to us. We tell ourselves this story that we deserve the pain. If they left us, we deserve the loneliness. We deserve X, Y, and Z. We don't deserve to be happy. We don't deserve to find love. We tell ourselves this narrative and it keeps us stuck. And God forbid we have children and we teach them these same principles. Life is not as black and white as we were led to believe when we were younger. Now, depending on how old you are when you watch this video, you may say, oh, absolutely, I understand this concept. But if you're younger, this might be a more foreign concept to you. How many times have you put yourself in the situation? It's so easy when you're the victim to say, they hurt me, and to be mad and hold a grudge. But what about when we look at ourselves? It's almost worse. When we acknowledge and we accept that we caused pain to somebody else, we can't take that back. And we don't always get the benefit of closure either. That person may hate you for the rest of their life. How can we live with that? There's always that shame. Shame is different from the guilt. Guilt says I did something wrong. I can learn from that. I don't like how it felt, but I can learn from it. I did something wrong and I can make sure I never do it again. That's guilt. Shame says you're a bad person. And when I'm a bad person, when shame is the oppressive force over me, I believe that I'm going to continue to mess up. I'm going to continue to screw things up. I'm going to continue to hurt people over and over again because I suck, because I'm the screw up. That's what shame says. Guilt is I did this thing, but it's still empowering because I can choose not to do it again. Shame says I am the villain. I deserve to suffer. I deserve to go to hell. I deserve, you insert the blank of whatever shame tells you. Or I don't deserve to find love because I cheated on my spouse and broke their heart. I don't deserve happiness because I did this thing. We can tell ourselves a story all day long. And the victims out there, they may be screaming it at us. And they may be reaffirming that narrative and saying, you don't. I will tell you, if you are sitting here and you're very triggered by this, take a moment to take a breath and ask yourself, why are you triggered? Because if your knee-jerk reaction is to say, if that person caused this pain, they do deserve to suffer, you might need to take a step back and reevaluate yourself as well. And understand what I'm saying. There's a difference between boundaries and things that we allow and beliefs that we hold and compassion and forgiveness. I do not support murder, nor do I support rape, nor do I support pedophilia. I will absolutely put a stop to those. If necessary, I would take a life to protect my children, to protect my body. So do not get that confused with there's nothing wrong with what they did. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you recognize your own toxic traits and you actually experience remorse and you're changing who you are and you're healing yourself. That's different. Even somebody who is on death row, if they enter into this place and they recognize in themselves and they say, oh my God, what did I do? I am so sorry for what I did. And I really realized that that was wrong. And I own my story and I own the consequences. Can they not receive forgiveness? Can they not experience forgiving themselves? It is the victim mentality that condemns them to hell. It is the victim mentality that demands that they suffer. It is not the healed person's mentality. So when you are the toxic person and you recognize within yourself when you have hurt people, how do you live with yourself? That's what we're talking about. How can you forgive yourself? Every single one of us is guilty of hurting somebody, sometimes unintentionally. What about the person who gets into a car accident and takes a life? Maybe they were not drinking, they were not on their phone, they were not eating something. Maybe the sun was in their eyes and they didn't have control over it and they were trying to go slow and they just didn't see them. And they still caused injury or death. And they have to live with that. They had to forgive themselves. How do we do that? How do we move into that place when we don't feel like we deserve it? The first part is accountability. To recognize, yes, I did that, and to own your story. The second part is to understand that the decisions that we make are the best decisions that we can make at that time. Even when we know better, if we didn't feel like we could even get away with it, or if we didn't feel like it would be worth trying. Whatever the decision that we made, where we were in our lives, who we were, and the environment that we had come out of or that we were currently in, the things that we valued, our level of maturity, can you accept that the choice that you made at that time was the best choice that you could have made for that time, for who you were? Even if you knew better, you made that choice for a reason, right? Can you accept that that was the best choice that you could have made at the time with who you were? Can you forgive your judgment? Can you forgive yourself for judging yourself as wrong for doing what you did? And again, this might trigger you. And if it's triggering you, triggers are treasures. There's something coming up that's asking to be looked at, that's asking to be honored, that's asking to be acknowledged. Can you sit with this? Can you allow it to come up? Can you allow yourself to feel this? Don't turn away. Can you forgive yourself for judging yourself as selfish? I'm not saying it was selfish or it wasn't selfish. Can you forgive yourself for judging it as selfish? Because if you were saying, but it was selfish, that's a judgment. You're literally judging it as selfish. Can you forgive yourself for judging it as selfish? Can you forgive yourself for judging it as wrong? And if you feel this coming up either in your throat or in your heart or in your solar plexus and saying, no, but it was wrong, I'm not arguing with you as far as a moral standpoint goes or belief systems. Can you forgive yourself for judging it as wrong? Can you forgive yourself for judging yourself as stupid? I knew better. I was so dumb. I was so stupid. Why am I so stupid? These things that we tell ourselves. Can you forgive yourself for judging it as stupid, for judging yourself as stupid or dumb or whatever the word is that you're putting in your mind right now? For an example, can I say, I recognize that when I was in middle school, I joined in when this kid was being picked on. And I forgive myself for judging myself as wrong, for wanting to fit in with the other kids. I forgive myself for judging myself as wrong, for being afraid that they would pick on me next. I forgive myself for judging myself as stupid, for doing something that I knew was wrong, or that I felt was wrong, or that I was taught was wrong. I have a responsibility to be the person that I want to be now. And I'm grateful that I have a choice. I forgive myself for the actions that I took when I was in middle school and I didn't know who I was. And I sought affirmation from my peers and acceptance from my peers at the cost of another child's self-esteem, confidence, self-worth. What have I learned from this situation? I learned that I don't need the acceptance of people who are going to hurt other people. I learned that that's not a version of me that I'm proud of or that I want to be or that I even want to feel that way again. I learned what it looks like when we go against our gut instincts. And I'm committed to being the person that I want to be moving forward. And I forgive myself for not knowing who I was, and I forgive myself for not having this information in middle school that I have right now. How does that feel? Do you see how I did not belittle the situation? I did not make excuses for myself, but I did acknowledge where I was at and why. I acknowledged my part in it. I acknowledged what was at the root of my actions, which in that example was fear and the desire to fit in and the desire to be accepted. All of these things that are normal for human nature. Because ultimately it does come back to fear, all of that. Everything is either fear or love. As you take yourself through this process, it's important also to remember to allow yourself to mourn. Many times our identity is so wrapped up in the things that we've done. So say, for example, you have somebody who's a cheater. They cheated in this relationship with this other person. But if you look at their family history, there's a lineage of cheaters. Maybe their father cheated on their mother. Their grandfather cheated on their grandmother. Their great-grandfather cheated on their great-grandmother. And although that's not who they ever wanted to be, that still ended up somehow becoming a twisted form of their own reality. There's nothing more powerful to break generational patterns and cycles than for a cheater to acknowledge, I cheated, but I am not a cheater. Again, if this is triggering you, and what's the point of this video? It's how to help yourself when you're the toxic person. So when there's an acknowledgement of the behavior and a change of heart, and true compassion and empathy is experienced, and the person who committed adultery can say to themselves, I cheated. They're owning their story. They're not belittling it. I caused pain. I disrupted my family. I X, Y, and Z, whatever consequence came about with that. There's a big difference from owning the identity of I am a cheater. That's shame. And that will continue the cycle through generation after generation after generation. Even if the behavior is never repeated by that person, if they don't receive self-forgiveness, the pattern continues to repeat until finally somebody in the line will stand up and say, I forgive myself. How powerful of an example is that to your kids, if you have kids? To stand up and take ownership and say, I did this. This doesn't make me that person. That's not my identity. And that's what you'll mourn. Who am I if I'm not a cheater? I've been telling myself this narrative that I'm a cheater for 20 years, 30 years, 40, who knows how long it takes sometimes to reach that point to be able to forgive yourself. When you finally can and you let go of that narrative and you let go of your identity, can you allow yourself to mourn that version of you? And it might seem weird, but this is emotion. It's not easily packaged and placed with a bow on it and say, here you go. If it was that easy, none of us would be in these situations. We wouldn't have dysfunction in our families. We wouldn't have family lineage and patterns passed down from generation to generation. These things, they are complex, they're multi-layered. Can it be okay to mourn that identity? When somebody who has been raped, who has used that as a justification for not moving forward in life, and they've used that as a tool to manipulate others. Yes, I know, it sounds so bizarre. We don't think of rape victims as being villains, but the point is we're all capable of toxic behaviors. We're all capable of gaslighting. We're all capable of manipulation. But again, does that make that person a villain or the bad guy? Because that's a learned behavior for self-preservation and survival. So can we have compassion for them just like we have compassion for this person over here and this person over here? We change the narrative, we change the perspective, and it's easier for us to be like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that now. And I use the example of somebody cheating because I think so many people have experienced that from either side. Either you were the person to cheat or you experienced cheating. And it's a bit more polarizing. It's a bit more triggering, where we look at somebody who's been raped or somebody who experienced abuse as a child, and it doesn't justify their behavior, but we have a bit more compassion, we have a bit more patience as a society, a bit more understanding about where they're coming from and why they have those behaviors. And we recognize and we admire that they're working on healing themselves and they're experiencing this level of self-awareness. Can we not extend that to everybody who goes through that same self-awareness? It takes us looking at them just as much as them looking at themselves. But ultimately, again, let's come back to the point, when it's you, you don't always get the luxury of people having patience with you. You don't always get the luxury of society accepting you. You don't always get closure. You don't always get to apologize. That sucks. But how can it be okay? Say, I don't deserve to suffer. I do deserve love. I do deserve to be the person I want to be and always have wanted to be. I do deserve to stand a little taller. I do deserve to forgive myself. And have compassion on the people who will never see you that way. You can honor the pain that you caused them without owning it. I completely understand why that person is hurt. I know what I did to them was terrible. I honor where they're at, and I would never ask them to feel anything different. However, I cannot own that because that is toxic to me. So I can hold space for them. I can hold them completely blameless and understand that what they feel is valid. And I can still move on and move forward in my life. Letting go of the person that I was, letting go of that identity, letting go of that victimhood of myself. Saying that's not me anymore. Absolutely, I used to be that person. Absolutely. I used to be scared. I had a whole arsenal of self-preservation, trauma behaviors, victim mentality. Yes, that was me. Yes, their pain is valid. But my healing is too. And can that be okay? If there's somebody that comes to your mind that you think needs to hear this message, please share this video with them. You deserve love. You deserve to forgive yourself. You deserve to live. I love you all so much, and I will see you next time.